You're tuned in to the Big Smoke Chronicle podcast, where we get to interview seasoned professionals in finance, fintech, and entrepreneurship. We go beyond the surface to bring you the experiences, lessons, and skills that matter most in today's world of work. So let's dive in.
Welcome, Sheena, to the Big Smoke Chronicles.
Thank you.
It is a pleasure to have you here. So for our audience, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, firstly. So I'm Sheena. I have been in the recruitment industry for, over 10 years now. And what a journey it has been. I never thought I'd be here. So I started off my career at IAC and I spent 9.5 years there. And it was an amazing group of friends that we had. We genuinely got along so well. And I'm now at Astrum Search, which is also the people that were at IAC. So I very much have been working with my friends, I would like to call them. And I focus on professional services, anything across internal audit, risk, compliance, external audit, sustainability roles, you name it. There's a lot of service lines in the Big Four and top 10 firms. And that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years. And I enjoy it for all my sins.
Going off the back of that, what can a graduate expect from a career in audit?
So I would say you do your typical 3 years in audit, right? You study alongside, you do your ACA, ACCA in financial audit, working across IFRS, UK GAAP, all that sort of standard stuff. I think once you then qualify, it opens up the doors, right? It opens up the doors to financial controller roles, internal audit, risk assurance, compliance, and so much more. You see people going down a lot of avenues. There's different roles, roles that didn't exist 10 years ago that exist today. So your career that started off, I'm going to do this and this is what I do and I'm doing accounting, all of a sudden becomes very big. There's so many doors you can open up. So I think people can expect a lot from actually going down and doing an accounting role.
In your experience, what do senior managers, senior stakeholders expect from their teams?
Firstly, they want to see proactiveness. That's definitely something that's been coming up as a theme in my conversations. And I think what that means in reality is putting your hand up and asking the right questions, right? And not just asking any questions, it's asking the correct ones and well thought out ones. It's also probably looking at your team members around you and are they struggling? Have you seen, is there something that you can help them with, regardless of what level you are in the team? If you see a peer struggling, have you spoken to them? Have you said, okay, actually, this is how I do it? So, there's a lot of people in hiring, who are hiring at the moment who want to see people to, be in more, be collaborative. So if you're seeing and hearing, actually there's a role now and, they require me to be in 3-4 times a week. And that's changed since COVID. That is exactly why. It's because if anyone or if grads or juniors or any team member is actually going to learn, you will learn the best being around people. And that is exactly what hiring managers want to see from their team.
Having worked with hundreds of accountants, auditors, are there any traits which you've noticed that very successful auditors possess? Oh,
absolutely. I think if you are talking to, I'm just thinking of a few people at the top of my head, they are flexible, they're open-minded, I would say. So they don't have a rigid expectation in their mind of my day is going to look like this. If you want to be in practice, or I would say even let's take it beyond that, any role or any organization, I think you need to have a very broad mindset. You've got different risks that are coming up, and I think it's important to be versatile and adapt towards that. You have to think outside the box. You also have to, as an auditor, have to question things in a non-policing way. You have to get to the best auditors I know have actually made the other person they are talking to and trying to extract information out of like it's just a conversation. And that's all it is. It's just a conversation. So if I'm going back to answer your question and thinking about what things stand out with, people who really are successful in this area, it's the ability to really just extract information and be adaptable. there's a lot more, but I'd have to drill it down to those two.
And I suppose working in recruitment and working with various different firms puts you in quite a unique position, because you're able to almost see the bigger picture of industry.
Absolutely. I think what's beautiful about the position I sort of, sit in and what I've been doing is I see Big Four, top 10 and smaller boutique consulting firms across the whole range. Not only do I see external audit teams and what they're up to and what the demands are there, I'm looking at internal audit, cyber assurance, IT audit. I'm looking at sustainability roles, corporate finance roles, and I think the big thing that I really want to get out today is when people are unsure of the market, they are looking at just their team or perhaps looking at what's going on in the news. Where I feel quite positive about what the market holds for the future is if audit is quiet, M&A is busy, and M&A has been busy for the last few months. And that's usually a good telltale sign of it will become a busier market and it will trickle down, because if people are doing mergers and acquiring businesses, that's hopefully a positive sign.
So leading from that, we've been in a period of transition, and it really started from COVID.
Yeah. Perma-crisis, I like to call it.
And there's obviously been a lot of different geopolitical events. I suppose, how has the market evolved and where is it heading?
Yeah, really good question. I think, look, the market at the moment, let's be honest, it's a saturated market we work in, right? We are always looking for talent. We are always looking for influencing juniors to come in audit and stay in audit, hence why I'm here today. But I think in terms of where the market is going is there's going to be roles, again, similar to what I said before, in 5-10 years time that didn't exist today. So if you're seeing roles that say audit with an AI focus, audit with digitization focus, etc., it's because AI is being implemented in every part of our roles. It's affecting you, me, and the next person, right? So I think roles that don't exist today will have a huge factor of AI and robotics within those as well.
What are the different attitudes towards AI across firms and across the different sort of seniority levels within a firm?
Yeah, really good question. I think that's really important to talk about because, again, it's coming up in my conversations day to day. So AI, from senior leaders' perspective, it's happening. They're embedding it. Use it is the message that they are very much telling their workforce. From the junior perspective, it's a slight different stance and slight different challenge that senior leaders are hearing. And that is some juniors, not everybody, some people embrace it. You're talking to one of those people who tries to embrace it and uses it to the best of her ability. I think juniors are probably not wanting to use it as much. There has been a bit of pushback on using AI. My advice would be absolutely use it, make your work efficient and smarter where you can. Use that time. This is purely my personal advice. Use that time to go and network. Use that time to put yourself in front of people, businesses, client facing stuff, because that is how you make your name. So I'm very much a senior leader and my advice is use it. But I do get the pushback, I have to say, from juniors who may not want to use it or may not be so open to using it.
Going back to the talent landscape, why do you think firms struggle to retain talent?
Yeah, it's a big question and it always comes up, right? I think the reason firms or any organization, it's everywhere at the moment. I think the reason organizations are struggling to retain talent is salaries are going through the roof. And I think often this mistake happens because if you, the hiring manager, had at that level X salary, you think, that's what the market should be paying. The market has changed considerably. It's changed after COVID. It changes year on year. And salaries, let's be honest, have gone through the roof. They increase, more or less 18 months on average to 2 years. And that is where typically someone moves, right, on the market. That's the average tenure at the moment. for someone to stay in their role. So I think this is why people are really struggling to retain talent. It's salaries. You know, again, like I said, I can come across a whole host of things and give you a whole bunch of reasons. But if I was nailing it down to sort of one big reason, people are becoming more and more financially aware because of what's going on in the world, because of what is costing, you know, your household, etc. So I think it is salaries that are playing a huge factor in this.
So specifically, how does Astrum Search add value beyond recruitment? So I know you do training and advisory, but how else does Astrum add value?
So myself and my colleague Jules, a huge shout out to Jules. She is a huge advocate for networking. And I think anyone who has been related to myself or Jules or Astrum Search would basically know that Jules is very passionate about, you know, networking and events. And that's very much where I sort of learned. So I think what we do is we are huge advocates for networking events. We either love to attend them. You know, we recently attended the IAA dinner, you know, but we love to be there for our clients and we love to invite our clients because of one day out the year to attend something really nice. But aside from that, you know, we've done women in leadership events. We do drop-in wine sessions for, you know, ladies or heads of audit to come in and attend that because, you know, there's commitments. You know, people have children, they've got work. So we do drop-in sessions where people can come in and network with other people. So I think, you know, in that area, networking is definitely very key for us.
You specialize in risk and compliance.
Yep.
For our audience who may not know what risk and compliance is, could you perhaps give us an overview of the industry?
Absolutely. I'll give you a very brief overview. So like I touched on earlier, typically someone does your 3 years financial audit where you're just focusing on that. And then people move out to risk and compliance or risk assurance roles. So what they do for a business is look at the risks and what might be a business risk or operational risk to a business, and then look at controls and putting compliance or controls in place for that business to make sure if X happens, Y is in place to ensure that it doesn't happen, right? So that's in very layman terms as a non-expert auditor speaking. So that's what a person would be doing. They could either be doing that from a in-house perspective for one business. For example, you could be doing it for ASOS. You could be doing it for Dentsu, you know, just to name a few. Or in practice, you'll be doing that, but you'll be doing it for a whole host of organizations from oil and gas, BP, Shell, pharma. You could do, for example, Johnson & Johnson's, GSK. So you could be doing it for many organizations and you might be working on maybe 4 to 10 projects at one time, depending on what level you are and what projects you have going on in professional services. So in-house is one organization, you're doing it purely for them. And professional services, you're doing it for multiple projects where you get a huge host of exposure doing risk assurance from that perspective.
So that's quite broad.
Yes.
But are there, for example, any sort of specific examples? Would it be, for instance, working on a merger and acquisition in terms of understanding the risk? Or is it more in terms of the risk of fraud and the controls?
So there's a whole host, right? You've got your operational risks, which could be, for example, marketing, could be HR. So you'd go in and speak to HR. You might look at their marketing strategy and say, you know, for example, I'm working with a media client at the moment and they very much focus on that area. Their risk assurance role that I'm working on at the moment, that person would very much be looking at the risks. For example, if there's an advert that's going to go out, is that advert correct? Is there anything that shouldn't be on there that might offend a whole host of people? Those are the kind of different risks from an operational perspective. Financial risks you're probably looking at is anything to do with numbers, right? For example, if I really, really get into it and break it down, businesses and systems, HR pay your employees, right? What if somebody just puts an extra zero on the end of that salary? They've got paid significantly more. How do you ensure that doesn't happen? How do you ensure you put a control in place to make sure people are being paid the right salary at the right level? Believe it or not, I've worked in places where you never get the right salary. right? You get paid wrong every single month. And, that's just because somebody did it wrong. So that's what essentially someone would be doing. It's getting as sort of really down to the nitty gritty as that from a financial and operational perspective. And that just gives you hopefully some of the flavor that someone might be looking at from a risk assurance perspective.
And getting into the nitty gritty of it, what's the day in the life of a risk and compliance junior? And how does that contrast to the day in the life of a risk and compliance senior?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a junior perspective, you are very much project-based if I'm talking about professional services, you're working across different projects. You've got reviews, doing the report, if I'm not saying it in actual succinct order, actually, maybe I should. So you go out and you speak to your client, you do your findings, you then report back those findings and you analyze those and have a report. And then you present that back to your client to make changes, whatever changes they need to make. You're the expert here. I'm not. So hopefully I'm doing that some sort of justice. From a junior perspective, that's basically what you'd be working on project to project, right? But I think as you get more senior in the business, for example, if I talk to you about manager, they probably take away some of those more junior level duties, but actually they're looking at projects, budgets, right? They might have a project come in and say it's worth X amount of £1 million. They have to decide as a manager what resource they need on that project, right? How much is that going to cost? What partner do I need for sign off? That project management skills and those budgeting skills and the people management skills, this is exactly why people go to practice to learn those skills, because they don't really tend to get it from anywhere else. If you're then looking at a senior leader of the business, they might be, yes, absolutely, they're looking at budgets and financials all day long, right? They're looking at how to look after the team. They're busy trying to recruit as well. So they've got that added on their list as well. But not only that, they're in charge of business development, and that's a huge host of going out there, maintaining your clients, your current clients, going out there and looking at new clients and what service offerings you can do. So I would say as you got the ranks, your job obviously just gets more complex for what it is.
And for someone who's interested in risk and compliance, and would like to go up to ranks, can you give us, perhaps in your experience, what is the timescale? And also, would you recommend changing firms or staying in one firm throughout the duration of your career?
Really good question. And look, I think it's a really tricky question you've posed there, right? I'll be honest. And I like that, because there's an advantage and there's a disadvantage to moving between firms or staying at one firm. It depends which side of the coin you're looking at. Technically, as a recruiter, I should say move between firms because that benefits me. However, I am a leader that is quite loyal to a business. In my recruitment career, I have moved once. I was trained up at one organization. And I think what businesses and senior leaders are looking for is loyalty again. That is lacking. An average tenure, as I mentioned earlier, is 18 months now. That's, for me personally speaking, that's not a long time to stay in a role. So I would say it's all about working for the right person, not even the right brand. I've always said to all of my candidates, and they probably hear me when I say this, you can go and work for the best brand. But if you're not working for the right boss or the right person ahead of you or the right leader, it doesn't mean anything. You need to work for the right person. You need to prove yourself. And I think that is whether you do it in one organization or whether you find that somewhere else, that is, you need to suss that out. Now, what my job is to move someone when I hear a challenge that they are facing in their current organization. I don't move them to help them have that same challenge again in a different firm. That's not the point of my existence. And that's not why people trust me or why people come back to me time and time again. My job is to eliminate that challenge and say, okay, you've got this and you're facing this at the moment. Perhaps move here. They're going through this challenge. Let's be honest, they are growing and that requires you to do X, Y, and Z. However, the problem you've got here won't be a problem over there. And I think that is where people need to just really think about their career moves in a bit more detail. Does that answer your question?
That does.
Okay.
And I'm curious when people come to you and they do you ever find that there's a common theme in terms of they may feel stagnant in their career or they're not seeing the development which they're looking for?
Yeah, I think sometimes people seek it a bit too quick. You know, people are hasty. I mean, it's not a bad thing. I am that person. I was that person. You're talking to someone I completely understand and sympathize and empathize with what you're looking for in your career. But I think sometimes there are things that as individuals we need to work on. You know, I didn't get my X promotion on time because I had things to work on. And something that I did each year is I did a SWOT analysis. This sounds really sad and very geeky of me. I did a SWOT analysis on myself each year. And I did it on my own independently. And I'd go to my boss and say, these are my strengths, weaknesses. This is what threats I think I can work on taking it back to my market. And this is what opportunity I have. What do you think I can do better? I was very proactive, right? But I was very hungry. And I'm one of these people. Yes, I did get a promotion every 2 years. You know, in my career, I probably got promoted at my previous job 4 times, 5 times. But that is because I was proactive. And I'm not saying it's there for people. It is there for the right people who are really, really willing to take a hard look at themselves and really willing to learn. So to answer your other question you posed earlier is what is the typical time frame to move upwards, which I forgot to answer. I'm sorry, is you've got your typical qualification that you finish at 3 years. You then become a senior consultant, level 1, level 2, whatever that might be. Now, people expect, I want X salary or I want X title within 2 years. You might not get there in 2 years. You might need an extra year to work on something that is missing. And I think, again, if you've got the right mindset to really have that honest conversation, 1 with yourself, 2 with your leader, and say, if I complete, and this is very much what I used to do. I used to say, if I do X, Y, and Z this year, then can I have that promotion? And for me, it wasn't always about salary. It was about title. And I'm in recruitment. People are in recruitment, you know, for monetary reasons as well. Otherwise, why are you doing it? But for me, it was beyond that. I wanted to be good at what I do. And if I was good at what I do, the rest will follow. So I think that's what people need to do, is just give themselves a bit more time. And I also think that they need to go to their senior leaders proactively and say, give me feedback. What can I do better? And this goes back to what I was saying earlier as well, going full circle, is senior leaders are looking for people to be proactive and use initiative. So that's one of the examples where people can do that.
So I suppose another reason which you're in quite a unique situation is that you do talk to a lot of professionals where they want to make that change.
Yeah.
And are you at a point now where when you meet someone and they're looking to change firms or up their career, are you able to identify from that SWOT analysis what perhaps they need to work on, or whether it's the environment that's not right for them?
Yeah, and perhaps to answer your question, yes. You know, my job has been to assess someone in 30 seconds flat. I read a CV. And my job is to make judgment on that within 30 seconds, whether I want to pick up the phone or not, and whether I am willing to put this person in front of my client. If you think about it, if I put a candidate in front of my client has a certain opinion about what I'm providing on the market, right? So there are candidates on the market where I'll say, no, you need to stick it out where you are. And those candidates will probably hear this and say, yes, you did say that to me, because it's not the right time for you to move. You are not quite ready. You're not quite there. And I think people often want to move for a step up. And sometimes I have had to have the conversation of, you're not ready and my client is not going to give you a step up. If you're not ready in your current firm, I get it's the most advantageous thing to look externally and see whether that happens elsewhere. But often I have made many candidates move at the same level. You know, they might get a bit of an increase on the salary. Of course they should, you know, otherwise what's the point in moving? But you need to move laterally, hit the ground running. And I think this is the biggest point people dismiss. Move laterally, hit the ground running. That gives you a better advantage than moving upwards and then sinking and feel like you cannot manage. And there are businesses that I know, and there are organizations that I know where they've given candidates and their employees a 6-month platform and say, come in, hit the ground running, do X, Y, and Z, and I'll promote you. Now, that's not a promise they can obviously officially make, but they have done it. And the candidates have actually called me back and said that's the best thing they did. So it is in my judgment and my ownership, because my clients are trusting me, to give the right advice to that person.
So moving on to the different cultures within the industry. Obviously, there are different sizes of risk and compliance firms.
Yes.
The big four. But I imagine also that there are smaller kind of boutique firms.
Yes.
Would you say that there's a different culture or a different work ethic? Or to sort of think about that carefully is, I think people have a certain misconception about the big four, right? And sometimes it's been for the negative. And actually, I've had to speak to them and said, what you're hearing isn't quite right. Because if you think about it, yes, you've got a big global organization. But if you look at the partners that run that business and run that team, you've got your own pockets of culture. Yes, of course, to answer your question, a big four will run very differently compared to a top 20 that might have a small internal audit function. Of course, there are huge differences. But I think, again, there are many partners that I know who have a really good culture in the big four, and whether it's a small firm as well, it depends who it is. What I know is I cherry pick the hiring managers that I want to work with. And therefore, I know their ethics and their values are the right values to be able to put my candidates in front of, because the last thing I want is for someone to call me and say, Sheena, this isn't quite right what you told me, because that's not going to pay me any dividends or help my brand or help my name on the market. So I always say to a candidate, I will always tell you this role or this organization culturally is X, Y, and Z. However, you're in the interview. However, this is your life and your job. Therefore, you have to ask the right questions yourself and see whether the fit is right for you. Sheena, looking at it from the perspective of the hiring firms, what do you feel they could perhaps, are there any common themes which you feel can be improved on?
So I think with firms, because they are talking about culture so much, this is also equally important back to the candidate. So when I speak to a candidate about what is important to you, and not every candidate is saying money's up there, right? They want to work in a place where they are valued, where they are happy, where they have flexibility. Yes, they are coming into the office. I think everyone's got to that understanding of, I need to go back to the office now. But people are looking at, what is the culture? What is the team like? What's the hiring manager like? What's their personality like? So when I take on a job, I only take on a job when I've spoke to that hiring manager myself, because the candidate questions that I'm faced with when I'm presenting someone with that role is, can you tell me what they're like? How did you get along with them? Because Sheens, I can tell you're like this. So did you get along with them? So I'm faced with actually very intricate questions from the candidate about personality. And I think what businesses or any organization, not just professional services, could be doing is showing their personality in teams more. So if you look at social media, what are teams doing? Are they going out? Record that. There's marketing there. Everyone has hopefully a marketing person available, or someone who can just snap stuff. I'm a big advocate for doing it. I love putting things on my social media. So you'll always have someone that loves that part, and put that out there. Show the personality. People don't want to work for a hiring manager that is rigid in a certain way, or very serious. They want to see, does this person have a family? What do they do in their spare time? What's their hobbies? Can they get to know that person? Because everyone's human. And that's essentially what they're looking for. The other thing I think businesses could be doing better as well is, when they've hired someone, that person accepts the role. And often I have seen in my time, not calling out any organizations here, by the way, it happens across the board, is they've had that person accept and then they just wait until their start date. And often where I have come in and influenced many businesses and my colleagues, is I think businesses could be embedding that person whilst they're working their notice period. A notice period in our field or audit is 12 weeks typically, right? That's 3 months. That's a hell of a long time. So that person has a long time to change their mind. And hopefully they don't, hopefully as a recruiter, I'm keeping in touch with them. But let's say where it's direct, it might be a direct hire. I have heard from candidates, I've not heard anything. I've not heard it from the team. I've not heard from what happens. They've completely gone cold. Is the role still there? And then the candidate reaches out. So I think what businesses could be doing better is keeping in touch more. If you've got a social organize, invite them. If it's Christmas time, invite them to the Christmas do. Whatever it is you've got going on, invite them in for coffee. Get them to have lunch with someone and say, can you pop in for lunch for an hour so I can get the team to take you for lunch? It just embeds that relationship from the get-go. So that's something I think businesses could be doing differently as well.
Excellent. Thank you. So we're going to move on to the smoke signals section, which is short fire questions. I'll ask you a question, and just the first thing that comes to your head.
You might need some bleepers here. Go for it.
The future of risk and compliance looks like
evolving.
A good hiring manager is
open-minded.
The key challenges facing hiring firms.
Salaries.
The ideal candidate has
flexibility.
AI will impact risk and compliance in a
huge way.
Successful risk and compliance professionals have
tenacity.
Thank you, Sheena. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It's very insightful. And for our subscribers, thank you very much for tuning in. Please do subscribe, like, and comment. And if you'd like to follow Sheena, please add her on LinkedIn or follow us on Astrum Search.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to the Big Smoke Chronicle podcast. We hope that you've enjoyed this episode. And if you enjoy the podcast and would like to support, remember to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.